My name is Andrew Kennedy. I'm an advisor to the Institute of Food Technologists Global Food Traceability Center. And welcome to this afternoon session at Traceability Central, our first ever Traceability Central. So welcome. And hopefully after the session, you'll have a chance to visit some of the kiosks in the company so you can see the traceability technology in real life. So I'm very excited about the next presentation. Ripe.io is going to be talking about a combination of technology and freshness in the food supply chain. And we've gone all morning without talking about blockchain and traceability. So it's a miracle. I have no idea how this actually happened. But now we get to talk about a little bit of blockchain and food traceability and freshness. So Ricardo is the Director of Digital Food Science at Ripe.io and brings a lot of the technology the food science to the technology. So he will inform you about exactly how the food science and the technology work together. So I think you'll find this a very interesting presentation, and afterwards you can visit them over at the kiosk. So Ricardo?
Thanks, Andy, and welcome everyone. I'm really happy about the fact that IFT had this Traceability Central event and focus. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a background. A few years back, when I was managing innovation for flavor and ingredient companies, there was always this dichotomy of maintaining competitive advantage by keeping our trade secrets and our knowledge, and on the other hand, is increasing pull and demand for transparency. So I'm happy to be here today because technologies in data gathering and data validation allow you to have both. And so during these next 20 minutes, as well as over the 3 days at the booth, we're going to show you how Ripe.io's food quality platform can help your business create value through transparency. So let's start again. We had the speakers before alluded at the big challenges in the food system. And we are all aware of the tremendous amount of food we waste, the big impact on the business of food recalls. The 56 billion are only data for the US. And obviously we had an entire session on food fraud. So when you look at these mega challenges and you look at the structure of our food systems, let's say that those challenges are partially due to the opacity and the fragmentation of the players across the food supply chain. So what if we could come to a transparent food supply chain and connect all the players so that data can seamlessly flow from the seed manufacturer all the way to the consumers? So for those of you that are in the traceability business, you would recognize some business benefits. And I'd like to combine into the 3 buckets that you see on the right of the slide. So usually businesses are implementing traceability for operational efficiencies so that they can have a better look at their data, how they flow, management of inventory, so they reduce the waste and they also reduce cost and time. The big bucket is the stakeholders' demand, and that's the big pull on traceability that can come from consumers that want more transparency, want to know about origins of food, but also regulator, obviously for food safety, or clients. Think about the Walmart case, where now Walmart asks all their lettuce and spinach supplier to adopt blockchain technology to trace their product. The third bucket, which is very important, is the competitive advantage. Being able to collect data across the supply chain can inform a new way of producing an ingredient, sourcing it, so that it can be optimized for quality and taste. So how do we get to this the shift to transparent and connected food system? Obviously, this is all about data and having a comprehensive data platform for capturing the data, for storing, for security, being sure that they are validated with the proper certification bodies, we can do analytics and obviously connect all of them. And given the fragmented structure and the distributed structure of our food system, enters blockchain. Blockchain and distributed ledgers are adding value through the way the software is built and through the way that information is digitized. So every bit of food or certification around food can be digitized and can flow from one player to another across the supply chain. I just want to focus on the added value that distributed ledger technology are bringing to traceability. Obviously, traceability exists without this, but this is bringing added value that were not possible before that technology. And the three main benefits I want to focus on in general are the fact that it's a distributed ledger, meaning that we can trace, we can have traceability, validation, and ultimately consensus without sharing data with a central authority. So that if a player or if a buyer or if a ingredient manufacturer wants to share only certain amount of data that are functional to traceability, but doesn't want to share all sorts of client list and trade secret, they can do it in a very safe and secure manner, which is linked to the second benefit. The data are encrypted, but once you put data on a distributed ledger, you cannot change it. This has a tremendous benefit for auditing bodies or for a different player, from the supplier to the warehouse and distribution all the way to the end client, to have access to the record of data and to check the process of the data. And last, obviously, the entire digitization of the supply chain that allows you to collaborate, speaking the same language across the different players, as well as create data analytics for quality. So ultimately, what this creates is a single trusted view of data that allows you to create value for the business. And I'm going to give you a few examples of this. In food, now there's been in the last 3 to 4 years, a lot of reports on how this can be a disruptive technology to apply to supply chain especially. And I just want to mention that especially with the executive survey that Deloitte does every year, it's not a matter of if I'm going to use blockchain for my business, but how can I use it to maximize the ROI for my business. So let's go to specific examples, as Ripe.io focuses only in the food and ag sector. We are a 3-year-old company, so relatively young, and the long-term mission is to provide a platform where ultimately everyone can have access to transparent and reliable information about the journey, the origin, and the quality of their food. Now, what we do in a nutshell is to digitize food items on the supply chain. So what we create, we call it the food bundle. We create a digital twin of, say, a tomato that is from the seed of the tomato that is planted in the soil all the way to where the tomato is eaten at a restaurant chain, for example. And we create, or the case of cocoa beans, for example, and other ingredients we work on, we create this digital twin that contains all sorts of information about the food item. And in the slide, you can see some information on the farm, collected through sensors in the field, for example, or through environmental conditions. We collect certification. There's a very easy way to upload and check documents on the ledger. Then we collect information about the transportation, either only simple timestamps or also condition of traceability, and which includes, for example, temperature and moisture or cold chain condition in transportation. Same at the warehouse, and ultimately all the way here depicted the case of a restaurant chain that wants to collect the information across the supply chain. And the way we collect those, the channels are, some of the channels are depicted on the bottom, so from sensors to document to direct link to the ERPs of the different companies that work with us. And obviously all sorts of barcodes, including the GS1 compliance or the QR code. I will give you a demo on the QR code acquisition at the end of the presentation. This is what our product, so to speak, looks like. And our product is a software and a platform of services that include a big part of data capture. We have a data format standardization, which is basically that multi-plug that allows you to convert the different data format into a single readable one. The core of our platform is blockchain, is distributed ledger technology and data processing, but by all means, we don't use only this, as blockchain has some advantages, but also some disadvantages in terms of speed for data analytics. And the output depends on what our client are requesting. So it might be an interface, a user interface where we showcase the journey of food with the food browser. We might just transfer data through API, or we might do a little bit more with service analytics. Who are our customers? Say we can work with all players of the supply chain. So far, these categories are the categories we are active in. So restaurant chain, distributor, farmers, ingredient companies, CPGs. But obviously, this is open to create a network that needs to encompass all players across the supply chain. And so in terms of categories so far where we are active, dairy is a big one, proteins with poultry, beef and seafood, we are starting to work on that. Fresh produce is our main focus, but also ingredients such as cocoa, for example, sugar beet and sugar cane, and we are exploring all sorts of other opportunities in terms of ingredients. I'm going to quickly show you how the process of working with us would function with the different stages, and then we're going to end up with a couple of use cases that we are currently working on. So it all starts with onboarding, meaning we need to get the information about your supply chain, your suppliers, the ingredients you're working on, to then map the process based on what is your major challenge. Clients are willing to check for authenticity and proof of origin, for example, but they might also want to go for the whole suite of tracing and quality. And so depending on the bigger need, we are we are depicting the process and we do data mapping. We create the digital twin based on the element that we selected that are needed to track and trace the food item. And then the most important part that creates unique value to the business is that we define user and data access and restriction. Actually, the clients define that so that they know what they want to share, they know how and when to share it, and we define the data that can be shared in open with the community and the data that need to be shared with a very selected group of users. Visualization and insight is obviously the output. So just to give you an example of onboarding, this is a case of a farmer. There's a lot of data and interaction, but in the different steps, information about the geolocation of the farmer, information about the products and the produce they grow are examples of onboarding. And we can definitely talk more about that part at the booth or after. In the case, for example, of cheese, we provide some simple look at the supply chain from the farm all the way to the consumer, keeping a special attention to what we can track from stage to stage. So you can, the tracking IDs. What is it that can be traced from the beginning to the end? How we can translate that into a seamless flow of information. Once we establish all the data items, and this is very product specific, we create libraries and we pull from our data libraries together with input of the client the key element of that food item that want to be recorded. And with element of the food item, again, transactions, invoices, POs, certification, all the documents that are currently sometimes at the farm level or even with big companies are stored in a drawer with piece of papers or PDF, and it happens at all level of customers. That's amazing. We can digitize those. After that, this is the part of permission. So, for example, if our client is a quick service restaurant chain, we define with them which data are restricted to them, which data are restricted to their distributor, and which data they can share throughout the supply chain, so that the farmers have also a benefit of an input, for example, coming from how the consumer liked their product. In terms of visualization, again, imagine you are the buyer, you are the QSR company. You can see all your suppliers, or all the, in this case, all the farms in one of the screens. You click on the screenshot, and you can have a snapshot of the farm, what is growing where, then the travel journey of a given item from the farm all the way to the restaurant, for example, and then what are the conditions, humidity, transportation conditions, mileage, temperature, obviously. And we can do that live, or it can be done as a post-recording and reading, depending on the sensors that is being used. I was mentioning about added value and services, and because flavor is my background, and some of our clients are very interested in that, with the ability of collecting data from the seed all the way to the fork, and with fork I mean even sensory surveys. We have a partner to help digitizing the sensory data. We can then create analytics, correlations between the condition of growing and how a consumer will prefer a product, or the condition of the condition during transportation at the warehouse, and how this is linked to consumer preference or to consumer flavor profile. So that is being able to have all the data on a single platform allows you also to create data intelligence, obviously. Coming to the use cases, the first one is a very simple one we did for the dairy farmers of America. Very simple. I mean, it took a lot of work, but the question was simple, and it means, where is my milk coming from, how much it traveled, and what are the sustainable practices of the farmer that produces that milk. So if you have an iPhone or a QR code, you just open your camera and you can scan the QR code on the bottom. This will drive you to the browser that we created for DFA. I just took a snapshot of the browser here, and you can see the journey, some of the information that the client wanted to show. We collect much more, but it's ultimately up to the client to decide what they want to show to their consumers. And so you can give it a try with a camera, or obviously we can I can show you later on. And the second, and I'll give you a few minutes if you want to scan that the QR code and give a reading to that. The second example is the most exhaustive client case we have. They want to monitor quality from farm all the way to the fork. This is a high-end salad chain, and so we call these cases track, trace, and taste. And so, say you have a tomato that is grown on a farm, and you want to monitor all the way to the restaurant. The first screen gives you the simple journey of that tomato. it left on July 16, and it came at a reception on July 18. It was picked up at the farm, and it went to the restaurant through warehouses. Then these are real data on the farm through a sensor partner that we put on the farm on the condition of the soil. So NPK, moisture, temperature, and that is what our sensor in the field looks like. We had some few accidents with trucks running over the sensor, which is about 3,000 for one sensor. So obviously you get to acquire and you get to experience all sorts of live condition when you acquire data from the field. Next, this is another reusable sensor that we use for temperature and moisture monitoring, and again, that is from the time of the pickup all the way to the restaurant, and you see fluctuation in temperature and humidity. And last, on that very same batch of tomatoes, we run a comparison for flavor. The one that was 10 days old, so that was served after 10 days from harvest, versus the one that was 1 day old. And we tasted them, and you can see the differences in flavor profile. So with the 1 day old, we expect being more tart, being more crisp. Probably the texture is harder, but ultimately we had a higher liking with the more mature tomato. And at our booth, you can also experience the survey. We have tomatoes. You can experience how our survey for sensory works, and you can taste and have your personal flavor and texture profile as well. I should mention that on the right side, we also monitor physicochemical properties. This is a non-invasive sensor that is used to monitor, for example, Brix level, and we kind of correlate that with sweetness perception and all the other sensory dimensions. This is probably the most important part, because again, I mentioned traceability. We are putting all data on the blockchain, and what you see on the third column, blockchain, if you can see that, you don't need to read it because it's a series of characters, but each of these series univocally identifies one event, which means the event of reception of the restaurant, for example, with all the different data points of that event. So through access to that particular hash, you can recover what event was went on. And so that's why, using the food bundle and managing the events in a sequential manner, you can have access to the story without being able to alter the data. Last, I want to show you a little live demo on a tool that we just created, and that's through our app and through a browser. We can generate a QR code. So I'm gonna do that now. And we do that for example, clients that either don't have the infrastructure to read other kind of barcodes. So for example, small farmers, they do have their iPhone. It's easy to read a QR code through a phone, and then this QR code can be read throughout the different steps of the supply chain. Information can be as simple as a timestamp, as I will show you now, or can be obviously encompassing much more data on the same QR code. So here's how this looks like. So that's close. Entering the password, and so we generate a QR code here, and we can name it IFT Live Tomato. Select the product type, submit, and now that QR code can be printed, can be sent to the initial stage, and here I'm reading it with my reader. And I'm gonna ask my colleague Caroline to do the first step, the harvest. And so you should see now the harvest coming in here in New Orleans. So now another colleague that is, I think, in Maryland will live read, so he can retrieve that QR code either from a crate or here on the browser, because it's a demo without the product. He can take this, select the IFT live tomato, and hopefully in a few seconds the pickup will happen. Perfect. So again, imagine you are following that crate of tomato across the country. So a third colleague now in New Jersey will get this tomato there, and see when he's ready, and then he's gonna ship it back to New Orleans. Let's give him a few seconds. That's live, so it should arrive. But so that gives you also an idea of what can be okay, perfect. That's in New York, and he's gonna ship it back to New York, from New York, and I'm gonna try and receive it back here in New Orleans. This is a flash tracing of tomato, because in 3 minutes we're gonna do the whole loop of the country, which was not the same as yesterday's flight from New York. Let me see if we can do it. Should be coming anytime. Perfect. And then I'm gonna receive it. So this gives you an idea of the easy interaction that you can have, and you just need an app and being able to read that QR code to trace it. Now, just to finish up the things, this is the value. This is the value that our clients, the clients that we are allowed to be obviously named here, what they see as a value, especially on data intelligence, the first one, on the fact that RIPE merges the data technology with food science. And just a shout out to our partners. On the right, all the sensors we've used, our investors, the accelerator we went through. And this is our team at work in all sorts of settings. So with that, I'm open to questions. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Are there any questions?
So do you interact with any other companies that use blockchain? Like say one company uses some other company's blockchain and you use that. If I use your product, am I missing parts of the supply chain unless I use both products?
It's a really, really good question. I think about communication amongst the blockchain ledgers and interoperability. So yes, there are other companies that are using blockchain. The biggest one is IBM Food Trust. And obviously, the idea is to have a network where the companies that are using IBM Food Trust can use our platform and can communicate data across the platform. So we are working on that communication. We work with clients that use both. And so far, there's still some work in the exchange of data to be done, but we are at a good step where we can interact with them and be complementary in the data acquisition. And there's gonna be a seamless communication soon. I can't give you an exact timeline, but we're working on that.
Thank you. So I'm a manufacturer, so I want to invest in, for example, blockchain, but I buy from multiple suppliers. And the data has to come through them. So what if my suppliers are not convinced in this technology? How do I get information? That's one. The next one is, so a lot of ingredients, like for example, cocoa beans, let's say, they come from Nicaragua, West Africa, Ecuador, all over the places. How do you get data from those rural or remote areas when there's no way? I mean, a lot of things are anecdotal. You don't know, and GPS is like right now coming into picture, and you don't know how many hectares, how many tons, stuff like that. How do you gather data, and how are they input in the system?
Both questions are really, really relevant. So the first one on the supplier, obviously that model works with cooperation, but what we observed is that obviously, let's say a lead client, the QSR, or you as a manufacturer, can discuss with your supplier to bring them on board. If you have leverage, better. But what we do with the suppliers of our client is that we make them understand that there's value for them to get some data back. They know how the quality of their ingredient is faring downstream on the supply chain, and they can change to improve the quality of their product. This is one thing. The second is about the secrecy or the confidentiality of the data. While data are collected and you can interact with them, ultimately we can show and create permissions for the supplier so that they don't need to share everything with you, with the client. They need to share the most important information, and by looking at the different suppliers and comparing some of the open information, they can create intelligence for themselves on the product. So we observe that with farmers, with the neighbors that are serving the same client, and they want now to be part of this network because they get intelligence out of it. On the second question, we are working currently with 2 remote locations for cocoa bean. We do not have foot on the ground, but we rely on partners again, such as partners of the Rainforest Alliances. They have boot on the ground, or a partner in Indonesia that is focused on that specific market with over 200 people going at the farms and collecting data. The data collection is sometimes a challenge. We are working on that, and we can talk more about the specific challenges on that.
Hello. A similar question essentially to the last one. How do you ensure the quality of the data you've got? If you've got sensors all around the world, ensuring that they're all up to speed, calibrated, all at the right level to make sure that you can actually analyze the data accurately, is that something that you have to invest a lot into?
This is a business and a technical question at the same time. In terms of deploying a lot of sensors, we bring the sensor company in our project, and according to the economics of the project, we can choose the best solution for the client. In terms of the data accuracy, usually the choice of the sensor company comes also with validation. So soil sensors, for example, we ask that they provide a sample of the soil so that we see that there's accuracy, and that sample of the soil is also stored and collected on the blockchain. So the participant to the network can check. We are not the ones that will decide whether an NPK value is correct or sodium soil, because yes, we have ranges, but we can't check. We are not expert in every point of data, but we provide the lab analysis data as well, and some other verification that might come from other companies that kind of validate that into the network.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy.
Fantastic
And
presentation.
come to the booth for any questions. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Traceability Central. I have the pleasure of moderating a panel this afternoon. So my name is Andy Kennedy. I'm an advisor to the Global Food Traceability Center. And my background in traceability, 13 years ago, I co-founded Food Logic, which is one of the kiosks right around the corner. So I've been tracking everything from cattle to produce to seafood for the last 13 years. And I've had the opportunity over the last year and a half to work with IFT's Global Food Traceability Center since its former director, Tejas Bhatt, left to run the blockchain program for Walmart. So blockchain has had a major impact on my life because I was able to step away from being a software provider to working in pre-competitive traceability for the last year and a half. And I've really, really enjoyed it. And working together with the team at the Global Food Traceability Center, we also work in conjunction with the World Wildlife Fund on the Global Dialogue on Seafood Traceability, which also has a kiosk here. So Neil Eshelman, my counterpart from World Wildlife Fund, is manning that kiosk. So definitely stop by and say hi to Neil. He is an expert on seafood traceability, worked for years with Bumblebee, so understands the industry really, really well. So if you have any questions about seafood, definitely say hey to Neil. So this afternoon's panel, Traceability Today, a lot of traceability, blockchain and otherwise, things that you'll hear about in the media are oftentimes early stage proof of concepts. So it kind of gives the impression that traceability is much farther down the path than it really is. And so my frustration, as a technology vendor in the space and now working at a center dedicated to food traceability, is teasing out what's real, what's really happening in traceability versus the hype. And so what I wanted to do with this panel is bring together people that are actually, in the real world using traceability either in their business, helping other people implement traceability, and they can talk about, like I said, real world traceability. And we're going to do things a little different with this panel. So as questions come up in your mind, go ahead and shout out. Like, we'll have a mic running around at some point to collect your, to get your questions. So I don't want you to have to wait until the end, because sometimes, you have a great question and then 45 minutes later, you've completely forgotten it. You're totally numb. So let's just do it as we go along, make this a conversation, because really you have some amazing experts here on the panel. And I'm going to let them describe their backgrounds, but Laura Nelson from Alchemy Systems, want to raise your hand, wave. Tyler Lorenzen from Purus. And we'll get into this later, but he forgot something really important for this panel. So he'll explain that in a second, but he completely forgot something. And Christina Bierschwal from Where Food Comes From. Terrific. So without further ado, I'm gonna go. We're gonna start off with Christina. If you could tell us about yourself, your company, and your journey, like your professional journey, how you got on stage at Traceability Central talking about food traceability. Because it's not really something when you're like in kindergarten, very few kids, when they're asked what they want to do when they grow up, like sketch out, I want to be a traceability scientist.
Maybe now they will.
Maybe now they will. No, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, I want to be a blockchain traceability.
Probably so.
So tell us about your professional journey, your company, and what how you ended up.
Okay, hopefully I'm not too loud. So hi, good morning. My name is Christina Bierschwal, or now it's afternoon, and I work for a company called Where Food Comes From, which is an independent third-party verification and certification company. Our job in that is that we work across a wide array of verification standards. We have about 52 right now that we review products for. And in that, we help take claims that brands or companies want to make on retail packages or on menu, and then we work behind the scenes to help validate and authenticate those claims. Because our company started in livestock and meat, and Andy mentioned his history in meat, most of what we do is looking actually at raw commodities. And so in a lot of cases, we have to go back to the farm and ranch of origin and truly prove source verification and able then to follow and trace those products back. so that as a consumer, and we're all consumers here, so we have to make sure we leave that hat on as well, that consumers can feel trust in the products that they buy, and also believe the claims that are made on package. A quick note on my background. I grew up on a ranching background in a cow-calf operation in Central Texas, and my education is in animal science and meat sciences, actually. So I'm a meat scientist by trade, and have worked for the last 20 plus years now in a wide array in the perishable side, and now help my customers as suppliers understand some of the challenges that are out there. In many cases, as Andy mentioned, we're still at the beginning. And so happy to be on this panel today. I started about 20 years ago working on source verification for beef cattle, and how do we trace and track that product through processing. And obviously there's still a lot of challenges on that side too. So thanks for allowing me to be here today.
Terrific. I'm going to save you for last.
Okay.
Laura.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Nelson, and I'm with Intertech. Intertech is a company that's actually been in business since 1888. We're a global company. We do inspection, certification, assurance, and testing. We're quite global. So we have over 1,000 laboratories throughout the world. Many more, I guess we're up to 3,000 plus auditors, and we're in over 100 countries. What we have is something called Enlight, and it's a supply chain risk assessment tool. So it's a little different than some of the tools you've seen out there that you have. What we do is we have suppliers that onboard through this tool, and we can onboard anywhere from on-farm all the way through to further processing, retail, etc. And so we create a really bespoke program for that customer that wants to use that tool. So let's say it's all about food safety, right? You want to verify your suppliers through food safety. Then we have a onboarding and an assessment that's specific to food safety. We also have some customers that have social compliance as their big need. And so we have that kind of assessment tool. So depending on the risk is depending on the actual assessment tool. And then we have, again, quite unique in that we have a wrapper of services around that. So the system allows you to do a desk review. And if as a company, you're a little overwhelmed and you don't want to do that desk review, you can outsource it to Intertech. And then we create a scorecard for those suppliers, and we help you identify who those high-risk suppliers are, and moderate risk, low risk, and help that customer work on a mitigation plan. So maybe it's on-site auditing. Maybe it's a testing profile. And so we have those services to support that. So my background, I'm a microbiologist. I've been in the industry over 30 years. Started when I was a baby. And I did a lot of auditing. I worked for Supplier Cooperation, another inspections company, and got kind of my passion around helping companies really increase or improve their program. I did some consulting with them. Certainly training. I now work with the People Assurance Division of Intertech, which is Alchemy. And so we are a training arm of Intertech. And we train over 3 million frontline workers every year. So it's a little bit about myself.
All right, thank you. All right, Tyler, let's hear how you end up on stage, which is probably a more circuitous path than most.
All right, so I'm live. Traceability actually has been in my background forever, but I'm more curious about when it's been in yours. For the show of hands, who knows where their breakfast came from this morning? With a show of hands, who has a cell phone either in their hand or their pocket, right? There's more computing power right on our bodies every single day, but yet the food industry and many of the foods that we ate, we have no connectivity to where they came from. To me, that's a huge issue, and an issue my dad told me 30 years ago would matter someday. And I sit here as not a professional in the food industry necessarily by choice, but my dream job I got canned from, which was playing pro football right here in New Orleans. And I did discover a very true path on what is the nutritious purpose of my food and why does it matter? Because as an athlete, you have to understand what you're putting in your body for the output that you can put on in the field. And what I think is more, and where I think traceability and transparency is going, is way beyond the nutritious purpose of the food, but rather the nutritious purpose of the food for people and for planet, where your food comes from and the journey it traveled, and why that matters for the value proposition of many of our customers, I imagine, or many of the foods that we're eating every single day. So my company, Purus, is a plant-based protein company. We make pea protein, and we do that in a unique model where we actually develop proprietary seeds that we sell to farmers in the United States. All of the seeds that they grow, the peas they grow for us, we buy back and then make into ingredients right here at home. That's very unlike the typical model for making pea protein. In the end, pea protein is a name on the back of an ingredient facts panel, right? It's not, hey, this is Purus and Tyler's favorite pea protein made and grown in the USA. It's just pea protein. But most products that are made like mine that are called pea protein are grown in one place, shipped across the world, produced in another place, and shipped back to the United States, which is the biggest market for pea protein. So I think traceability matters to bring truth to the supply chain, but it even matters more to bring consumers along for the ride on the purpose of their food and how it impacts how their food choices impact the health of the planet, and sustainability and regenerative agriculture. That to me is the next tie down that will bring transparency and traceability to the next level for the food industry.
Excellent. And you can tell by lack of ring, he forgot his Super Bowl ring, because he is the luckiest rookie ever to show up during the Super Bowl season. So, but he did not bring it. Evidently, we don't have enough insurance or an armed guard.
The NFL stands for not for long. So timing was critical, a la Drew Brees. Thank you very much. New Orleans has a really, really special place in my heart. Apparently, IFT, the time has ran out for this great city, but maybe in the future.
Absolutely. You don't have to go play for the Bears. So focusing on traceability, one of the questions we heard earlier was, how do you actually get the data? So just data acquisition is a real problem in agriculture. So I guess starting with Kristen, if you could talk about how you get your data from, how the cattle actually type in on their iPhones the information. Like, could you explain how that works?
Well, and actually that's a great example where there is a tool called a electronic ID tag. And I have the photo up here on the recurring slides. And so in that, there is an ear tag that is implant, or like an earring. I call it like an earring. So there is an earring that a steer or heifer wears, and it functions like that calf's passport or driver's license. And it functions just like an RFID tag that would be on a pallet if you were scanning it in a warehouse. And so information is inputted into the system, and it is a protected system, so not anyone can input information about that. And so if you look at that, and there is the slide that comes up, and it has the date of birth of that calf, the range of origin, and then what particular production methods have been verified, that all lives in that ear tag. So then as the calf changes hands, and here in the United States, beef cattle can trade hands many times. up to averages like 3 to 7 times from birth as it goes in food processing. When it changes, and then there's a certain reader as it goes in through its different steps, or it goes into the harvest facility, that tag is read, and then that tag is transferred onto what's called a trolley tag as it goes through, and then it's inputted into a lot. So then when it goes into the facility, then you can access all the information about how that calf was born and raised.
So to give an order of magnitude, how many animals right now have those RFID ear tags in North America, roughly?
In the United States right now, about 9% of the market cattle have an electronic ID tag. So it's a growing number, but still, as Tyler said, there's still ways to go on that side. And most of those are being used because of export market requirements. That has been the driver for the last many years, is our export customers requiring that. And then now more and more domestic customers requiring that. And there's some programs that will launch this summer here domestically that require that.
Yeah, and the first traceability project I worked on in Canada, right now they have over 99% compliance. So 5 million head of cattle are tagged each year. In Canada, it's mandatory as a government-backed system. So, and what I've seen from that program is because almost all of them are tagged, there's huge commercial opportunity because every single one's tagged. So they're building, the farm to fork programs. It's easy because they're all tagged. There's common identifiers, common structures of data. So
Exactly.
That's what I've seen in Canada.
Yes. So as you mentioned, in Canada, it's mandatory. In most of our other trading competitors, they have mandatory traceability. In the United States, it's still voluntary. And so producers can elect to participate in those programs, and those are market driven. So.
Gotcha. So okay, switching gears now to the peas. So how do you, have the ears on the peas are much smaller. So how do you get the RFID tag? How do you track a pea?
Yeah, that's a. Is it working? So that's a really good question. And actually, I want to correlate this to our organic pea protein program, because in organic, right, everyone knows that USDA organic means, grown and made in USA, right? Wrong. That's not what it means. And the way the system is set out is literally it's just a certification program. And not to say I'm asking for an outright change, but if you're paying premium price in the grocery store, don't you want premium programs to support the integrity of USDA certified organic? And so when you look at pea protein, most likely peas are a commodity and mixed in a bunch of bins. Whole bunch of farmers bring peas in and then off they go. So is there a food safety risk between non-GMO and organic peas? Absolutely not. But there's an integrity risk if you can't delineate between non-GMO and organic. And especially it's unfair to the consumer if they're paying for something they're not getting. So with our model being back to back to back to back and all closed loop in the US, we have a leg up on where your food comes from. If you want to come meet our farmers, we could do that. But still, technology, and specifically technology that brings the consumer along for the ride so they can understand that there's a choice between product A that's fully traceable and transparent and product B that is not. We haven't brought that to life. And I think that's Christina's point, is there's work being done. And to your point, Andy, there's a lot of headlines around blockchain and this and that, but still there's so much work for us to connect people with food. And that's ultimately what we should do, because there's a connection that matters and your food choices do matter.
So do you think you have an advantage because you're a smaller operation? So the architecture of the systems can be discrete, so you can handle those on a batch lot basis, as opposed to larger commodities, like wheat and soy and corn, where you're dealing with commodity and many farms are feeding into the same infrastructure. So do you think you have an advantage from a physical layer?
Yeah, so I think on the quantum side, we're a young company, but we're the largest pea protein player in the space. And the thing that we do different than most others is we supply the seed. So we actually have to know the farmers that grow the product that we buy from them, which most seed companies sell the seed and they're done, or most ingredient companies just buy from the farmer, and it's cheaper if you can collect a whole bunch of peas and then buy from a co-op or so on and so forth. So I think that the inherent nature of how we build our company gives us a chance to create an identity preserved program that is traceable back to the source. Our focus is around organic. We think that organic is at an inflection point where it'll level up and continue to grow and create value for the consumer, or people may lose trust. And it's really important to our business. We're mandated to help organic farmers grow and become more profitable. So we think bringing technology along for the ride is a way to value up and to way to level up to the competition, where consumers can choose to put the value where they want.
So, Laura, you have the unenviable task of auditing these systems. So I would love to hear from the trenches, from the audit perspective, let's hear the good, the bad, the ugly, and what would you recommend? And based on your experience, what have you seen out there? And I'd love to hear also the craziest thing you've seen out there. But I would like to hear about, what are the best practices on setting up a program? What have you seen out there, and where have some failures been that you advise against?
Yeah, that's a great question. And our panelists are really on the forefront. But I can tell you that for the most part, that's pretty unique at this point. So as I shared, we help companies that are wanting to get some transparency or some vision into their suppliers. And one of our customers said, gee, we just need more assurance, to look at our suppliers. So they had over, I think, 700 suppliers, and they onboarded their suppliers. Now this company thought that they were dealing with processors, manufacturers. I mean, the actual suppliers. So we onboarded those 700 suppliers, and what we discovered is 97% of those suppliers were actually traders or brokers. And so there was a reason why they were getting some variation in their products, considerable variation, is because those traders and those brokers were purchasing clearly from various people, right? And they were really good at logistics and they were really good at delivering product, but they did not have that quality aspect or that food safety awareness. So when we kind of peeled the onion back, and the customer said, hey, help me try to get to that tier 1 supplier. So we did that. And then we had them onboard data where they have to, say, do you have a GMP program? Do you have an allergen program? And by the way, upload your documents that support that. And so when that work was done, we took another look at that. And what we determined was, a large percentage of them did not have programs. They were partially compliant in a lot of cases, or they were adopting some association programs and putting that in there instead of their own programs. And then, and of course, we did uncover a fair amount of data or document falsification. So people that were saying they were in fact GFSI certified, when we went to verify that, we determined that they were not GFSI certified. So a lot of the drivers that, it's really easy to as a supplier, as you're looking at suppliers, to ask them for information, they regurgitate it back, and then you've checked the box, right? You've said, okay, I've done my due. But when you start really verifying that data, which we do on behalf of customers, that's when you start seeing those holes and those risks. And so, Andrea, I would also say that we have a fair amount of folks that aren't even ready for a risk assessment tool like we have, because they don't know their suppliers. They don't want to know. Or they don't want to know. Exactly. So, trying to help people, number one, our tool is very easy to use. And number two, it really helps to peel that onion back, right? And to start looking at where are the gaps. If I think I know my produce suppliers, do I in fact know my produce suppliers? So it is an eye opener. And to Tyler's point, there are folks that they go, man, Laura, if I have problems, I really honestly do not have time to deal with it, you know? And again, it's that compliance check mark versus really looking at your supply chain and trying to elevate the performance and reduce your risk. So, yeah.
So if anyone has any question, feel free to raise your hand because we want this to be interactive. And to start off with, I have a question for the people in attendance here. How many people here are working on some sort of traceability project or thinking about it or beginning or investigating? Raise your hand.
That's awesome.
All right, so quite a few numbers. So yeah, so this is the opportunity. You have experts that have built traceability systems. So feel free to start tapping into their knowledge because we have tremendous expertise. So if you have any questions, Liz has got the mic. So just put up your hand. So over the past year and a half or so, I've been working on seafood traceability. So one of the challenges we've run into for data collection, and it seems sort of obvious in retrospect, is languages. So in the seafood industry, there's hundreds of different languages for data capture. A lot of it's in writing, and most of it's not digitized. So one of the things we ran into right away, we're like drafting all the guidance in English, and then a Japanese seafood company, major seafood company, is like, we're not going to read that. It's going to be Japanese. And oh, by the way, we collect in these 10 different languages. So just thinking of data collection seems really straightforward until you actually get out in the field and do it. So one of the things that we found is beneficial to getting started with the traceability project is to go out and test and try and do it, try and get some data, see what's out there, what people are using today, and don't try and change your system right away. Just figure out what they have, do a gap analysis, have some goals in mind, have some KPIs, say this is what we want at the end, but actually go out and try it and see what you run into. Because I've found traceability systems in a conference room work much better than out in real life. And has that been your experience, Christina? And I'd love to hear some of that, because cattlemen are so easygoing about data sharing and technology. So I'd love to hear about some of the huge success stories you've had in conversations with the cattle industry.
I'm gonna have to think about that one a little bit. I guess some people always say that, oh, you must have never dealt with grouchy or grumpy people or everything, so I think we're very fortunate in the United States and really across the world that there's a lot of great people involved in production agriculture. They can be grouchy or grumpy and they may not want to share any of their records, but we're blessed that at the root, the people that produce our food across the world, most of them do it because they love it and they want to be involved and they really feel a tremendous amount of pride in being able to be a food producer. I mean, I grew up around farmers and ranchers, and they may not know what they need to do, but they do love being able to produce food. So we're involved in a great industry. And then I guess, if you look at the other side, and Tyler pointed out, I meet a lot with farmers and ranchers, and I tell them, they're like, what do you mean consumers want to know where their food comes from? And why do they care if it's organic or non-GMO or no hormones or no antibiotics? And I tell them that we're really fortunate because our consumers do care about this and they really do want to know. And maybe they don't understand what all it takes to produce that or be able to verify or authenticate it, but at least they care and at least they want to know. That means we'll still have a food business. And we have the options to provide these voluntary labeling standards or voluntary claims. So it's one thing that we see as our role as a third party is we're trying to bridge that gap between the food producer and the consumer. And it is a very segmented and can be a long journey. And many of the things that we use are still very paper-based. We still review a lot of paper, and I'm sure that Laura does as well, but at least we want to have paper that we can feel trust in. And we go on site and we review those, and then people provide tests, they provide their sampling. So we're still reviewing a lot of paper, but it's a start. And you may have to have a lot of, very tedious programs, but at least it's a start to be able to build that supply chain and build those systems so that we can then feel really good and provide some risk mitigation to both the company and then the consumer. I'll think of some great stories, I'm sure. Now you caught me off guard, but
so do we have any questions at all from the audience? All right. So Tyler, and I think, Christina, what you were saying about the mission behind traceability is so important because that's what gets the buy-in. So with your employees, are they all bought into this mission, and how do you convey it? And so I'm curious how that conversation goes, because I imagine it's not easy doing this level of transparency and traceability.
I think it's interesting because it's not like the food industry is being created today, right? It's existed forever, and there's certain ways, to Christina's point about paper and a lot of paperwork. Those were the ways that a lot of the processes were built on. And so in some instances, it's really hard to get people to change. Hey, this works. My paper system, this filing system, it works. But I think when you look at food and specifically the curiosity of today's consumer, we don't have a choice. Traceability, transparency will be value add for 5 years and 10 years of requirement. So companies like ourselves have to say, hey, you know what? We need to get this paper process into a digitized process. We need to understand our data on a macro and micro level, and we need to make decisions and tell incredibly awesome stories about where our food comes from, so consumers can choose and vote with their dollar what's worth it to them. And that's what the brands need. They don't just need traceability because they want to be able to track and trace for recall purposes. They need traceability to showcase the value that goes into building some of these products that highlights the difference between this product and that product. And I think once we understand the value exchange to the consumer, that's when transparency will become value add. And the more and more consumers and all of us eat food, the more that we all demand that traceability is a requirement, the more everyone will level up. And food fraud will go from a $50 billion industry to less. And that is really, for us, getting our people on board with that mission, not a problem at all. I mean, we're fanatical about this stuff. And, I think there's a lot of people, to Christina's point, that are actually doing it right and connecting the dots so everyone can see the context and the why it matters to them. I think that's not a challenging endeavor. Getting all the data, that part's hard. And building the management systems and what these two are solving and what you're solving, those are the things that will get the industry to a better place.
So Laura, as you explain to people, that they need to invest in these technology systems, how much does ROI play into it? What are the drivers for ROI? Do you go through a consumer benefit, to internal, operational benefit? As you're trying to sell someone on this idea, what are the buttons you push, and what's the reception? And then how do you suggest people budget and plan for traceability?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we find is that some of those customers that are reaching out and saying, I want more transparency in my supply chain. I want to move into more visibility. What I'm seeing a kind of a shift, a trend, is from people moving from a transactional view where it's just a tactical, hey, how much is this ingredient? Pea protein, okay, I'll take that, and off you go. And as long as they give you the check mark stuff, that's fine. Moving from that to more collaboration, relationship building, with the knowledge that if you can get that kind of partnership, then when something comes up, maybe there's a shortage of something, instead of substituting it or adulterating it or doing whatever, then there's a communication path there. And so I think that is a trend I'm starting to see, and I think that what that delivers on is, again, that trust factor. I mean, we're always hearing about consumer trust and how consumer trust is declining. And I think as an industry, we're trying to do what we can to increase that. As far as the ROI goes, there is a considerable amount of ROI because we can talk all these numbers about recalls and trying to get ahead of that. Food fraud, trying to get ahead of that. And so I think that really speaks to people saying, okay, I need a comprehensive tool. I can't do it myself. I don't have enough staff to do all the audits that Christina does out in the fields. And I just need a bigger team, more resources. And so once they get to that period, I think they really embrace that. And the reality is a good portion of the cost of the tool gets pushed down to the supplier. So the supplier pays for a certain a small amount, but access to the tool. But in that way, that they can be a part of this organization. And what we find too is, from a supplier base, they're looking to try to elevate themselves. There's people like Tyler as part of the supply chain that's saying, hey, we're doing all these great things. Help us get a premium dollar for it, because we are going through all these extra hoops and we can't even demonstrate that to you, Mr. Customer. And so this tool allows people to do that too on the back end. So.
Yeah, I think, from an ROI perspective, what I've seen in working with some of these different systems, to your point, is there's some obvious consumer benefits. So you can sell your product for a premium. So that's one. You can sell more of your product because you capture market share. But really, when I've had to sit down and talk with people about traceability systems, they're like, all right, stop with the arm waving. Tell me what's the real benefit to me. What's the hard benefit to me? And what we've seen is there's a couple interesting things when you digitize your supply chain. So unexpected benefits pop out. So one thing we've seen in one recent application, working with a large-scale fast casual restaurant operator, one of their key issues was quality incidents. So they were receiving product from their distributor and throwing it away and not reporting that back. So it was just food waste that was unidentified and unreclaimed, and there was no credit back from the supplier, and there was no communication back to the supplier or the distributor. So there could be no root cause analysis to figure out why they were wasting food. Were they ordering too much? Were they getting stuff that had short shelf life? They didn't have any of the metrics. But what we found was, once they had the labeling and the scanning actually at the restaurant, then they were able to analyze those things, because then they could look at the sell-by date or use-by date that comes in digitally. They were able to capture that information and push it back to their distributor and to the supplier. So just that, just getting the credit back helps pay for that traceability system, because really traceability then becomes a communication system with your supply chain, up and down the supply chain, so that you can use it for corrective action and benchmarking. And increasingly with food waste, what we want to do is start tracking how much food is wasted and why, and start minimizing that. So tightening the supply chain, pulling some of the kinks out of it, and then having that digital information at each step. So you can see dwell points for food. You can see where food is being wasted. There was an earlier presentation that showed the supply chain as like a pipe that starts large and gets small. It just kept leaking more as it went along. And that's why I think that digitization at every point, it's not just at the farm or at the consumer level, it's all the points in between. That's really, really important for traceability. At least that's the perspective I've seen. I'd like to hear, if any of you share that perspective and have seen those sort of real world benefits pop out of a traceability project where you didn't really expect it was going to happen?
I think from my vantage point, it's, we could talk about ROI and all of this, but what if we don't? I mean, the cost if we don't advance the system is way outweighs the value that we're going to gain in a short amount of time, because it's not a matter of if, it's when. We have to do this. The technology is available. Consumers have information advantage on a global basis right now, and the food industry has to level up. It's happening in pharmaceutical. It's happening in med device. All of those same things will be required in what we eat every single day, and they should be. So do you have a specific example on measuring, it's kind of like marketing. What's ROI on marketing spend? I mean, that says let's spend less so we can sell more, right? That doesn't make sense. What makes sense is how do we create value, certainty, and transition to a state of trust in our food system? I think that would be good for all of us. It'd be good for our consumers, and it'd be good for the farmers that grow our food. And so that's why I think it's not a matter of if or when, and whatever the ROI is or isn't, we have to do it.
I think I'm going to quote you on that. Why on earth would you want to trace less?
Yeah.
It totally makes sense. I get it. Yeah, like we're heading down that path. So.
And obviously, in the last couple of years, there's a lot of choices on ingredients that didn't exist even just a couple of years ago. And when you listen to many consumers now, as Tyler said, they do vote with their dollar. And many of them, if they don't feel trust in certain products today, there are others, a lot more alternatives out there, some that you couldn't even imagine a couple of years ago. And so they do choose. And if they now then distrust products because they are not transparent and open, there are other options out there. So may come in our path.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I would just add too that we are getting to some sort of point where, the squeaky wheel gets the attention, and the suppliers that are being pinged and asked, to hold their feet to the fire on, social accountability, quality, food safety, certifications, whatever. Those folks are delivering, right? Because they have to. They have to sell. But it's in deep contrast to those other suppliers that are skating through the world out there that aren't subject to that kind of scrutiny. And I think at some point, when you start looking at your supply chain and you're starting to identify those ones that are performing at a higher level and responding, you're able to sort of start self-selecting. And the other thing I would say too, there is some sort of this idea of liability. I don't like to talk about that as the big heavy hammer, but there is this liability situation where, if you aren't doing a fair amount of due diligence in your supply chain, there is liability in your organization, and there is a higher risk. So, whether you want to do it because it's the right thing to do, or because your shareholders are asking you to do it, or your attorney's asking you to do it, or whatever, I think we're getting to a point where it's going to be more prevalent, and it is the wave of the future for sure.
So I'm curious from the audience, people that are implementing traceability. So any stories from you guys, like where you're at? Mike's right there.
Yeah. So I am a research assistant in agri and biosystems engineering, and I am working on a traceability plan. So my work is developing a traceability system for the entire grain supply chain. So I am dealing with lots and lots of data, because my research is data based and analyzing what's macro and what's micro data. So my question is, I am dealing with traceability in terms of traceability objectives and providing each traceability objective to each stakeholder, so that it makes us easy to differentiate data in different objectives. And what problems I am facing is how to validate that or how to verify that, because it's lots and lots of data, and you can only verify hazards from previous data, and processes like sampling or mycotoxin testing, all these things are like cannot be so much aggressively included into a traceability plan. So I am also doing a failure mode effect analysis of all the data points which I have in my system. And towards the last, I will be developing a traceability plan on the lines of a food safety plan, so that it can gain a much not gain, it can be popularized as on the lines of a food safety plan. So my question is what are other methods that the industry is adopting for validating or verifying a traceability plan? Like, other than mock recalls, we can do mock recalls. So other than that, is there a way to validate it?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big question, right? You're asking for people to submit all this data, and at the end of the day, you need to verify it, right? So some of the things that we do is we'll take a certain statistical number, and we'll do the testing. So let's say there was some examples that we've had, pesticide analysis. So we do a pesticide analysis as a verification point. And, you know, I think, just as an aside, I think sometimes we here in North America take it for granted that when we say we need a pesticide screen, that what we, at our detection limit, we just assume and all of this other stuff. And so what we find is that's not the case. And so, to your point, though, I think there has to be some kind of sampling plan that is a verification tool that is done. And really, you can look at detection limits. You can look at methodology. You can look at lab certification 17025. I mean, there's things you can do to kind of uncover if there's some blatant challenges to the data set. But ultimately, a sampling plan to verify would be the ultimate, I think.
And I've seen recently one company I was working with, a tuna canner, and they had a third-party certification to the ISO traceability standard. So they actually hired a company to go out and do that sampling and analysis. So that was effective. And one other branch that I've seen people using instead of doing so much on-site audit work is using machine learning. So using those algorithms to take your history of the data over time, so then you can detect anomalies based on prior experience. So I think machine learning is going to eventually augment audits, at least so that you have your audit data to kind of ground truth your approach, and then buttress it with machine learning.
I couldn't understand a lot of your question, and we can sure visit more later afterwards. There are some examples of some public standards. They may not be for that specific attribute, but also our company helps develop internal standards that we can help you review. And it may just be that you need to establish a threshold. Like I think you said mycotoxins, right? There are some rapid tests available for grain and mycotoxins, and then you could just set in maybe you have a lower internal threshold than your public threshold that you share with customers, and maybe you have your statistical process control chart that helps you track and trace that. So we can visit more about that. I think there's some models that you could use.
Do you have any additional questions? So, love to hear about someone else's supply chain. Anyone else got a supply chain they're willing to share? Any traceability experiences from the field? Any projects going on? No one's willing to share. So everyone's traceability is perfect. All right. Yeah.
Thank you. From your perspective, is there an industry or an ingredient that has shown the most progress in traceability? I cover the chocolate confectionery world, and that's something that cocoa suppliers are talking a lot about, and implementing various technologies. Is that an example of one that's been successful, or is there one that we could all look to as a role model?
Do you guys want to offer one?
I'm not an expert at the ones that I know.
So from my perspective, the meat industry. The meat industry has done a really, really good job of traceability, especially in North America, from slaughter to boxed beef and then forward. And that's a function of, I think, scale, because there are like 4 large companies that kind of dominate that industry. And they got together working with GS1, which they have a kiosk just over here. And I believe the Tyson case study is on there. So if you want to check that out. But Tyson, working together with some of the other meat companies, they quickly aligned on using the GS1 standards for case identification, advanced ship notice, EDI messages, and they quickly rolled it out and adopted it. So if you go into a distribution center today, whether it be restaurant or retailer, pretty consistently, if you go to the meat section, there'll be a common case label. The pallets will kind of have a common pallet label, and they've done a really good job of digitizing at least the production process. The cattle side of it, like feeding up to the slaughter facility, that's probably an opportunity for growth. But within the processing facilities, I say, the meat industry's done a pretty phenomenal job.
And I may add on just to what Andy said. And I think one of the reasons, obviously there's been a tremendous amount of investment, but and I came up through the USDA plants and worked in quality assurance. And now when I work with other facilities that are under FDA jurisdiction, which are just now going through mandatory HACCP, it is a good chance to reach back out to your colleagues, maybe that have been in a USDA inspected facility for years. I was in the plants 20 years ago when we had to go through mandatory, the mega regs, we called it, mandatory HACCP, and it was a tremendous learning opportunity. And those things are now commonplace. And so now when we go into FDA facilities and we're saying, hey, you need to lot your product correctly, they're like, what? What do you mean? My lot goes for the whole week. I'm like, no, that sounds okay, but that's not how you get a good recall plan in place. And so it is a good opportunity. The meat plants, it has become commonplace to have excellent lotting, excellent segregation, excellent ability, as Andy said, to scan a barcode. And I can tell you exactly where that came from all the way up in a very quick time frame. And that's still new for a lot of FDA regulated products. So there are some good examples, and I know QA folks are great at leaning on their folks inside. There is some good example in meat and poultry facilities that have been doing it for years, and the systems work very well.
Great question. Any additional questions? So the other industries that I've seen that are moving, kind of at different paces down that. So produce, and we've had recent challenges with romaine, but the Produce Traceability Initiative has been around since 2007. And so we saw a big burst of energy for the first few years that the program started, but it wasn't adopted universally at the retailer side. So Walmart adopted it, so anything going to Walmart had to have a case label. But it's sort of fishtailed for a while, waiting for additional retailers to pick up the baton. And recently, because of the romaine outbreak, Walmart has rolled out their mandatory leafy green traceability initiative, with IBM Food Trust and using blockchain. So that's a lot of what you've been hearing about. But that's really focused on the leafy green suppliers. So I would say right now that sector, like the leafy green sector, is digitizing and labeling and tracking at a much more intense and rapid pace than any other part of the produce industry, because they've got that spotlight on them. As the meat folks told me, when they were going through mad cow and E. coli in beef, they're like, all right, it's our time in the barrel right now, but eventually it's going to be someone else's. And right now it's, leafy greens, their time in the barrel, their time to figure out traceability. And that's like a horrible time to figure out traceability is when the FDA is asking about it. So one of my pieces of advice to people is when no one cares about traceability in your industry, that is exactly the time to do it. Because the last thing you want to do is, building your traceability system with the FDA sitting outside the door. So, or USDA.
Or 2020 or whatever.
Yeah, so I guess
CNN.
like tips and advice from the panelists on, traceability and what to do and when to do it and how to do it would be great. Just kind of finishing statements.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're hearing it's here, it's now. So if you aren't doing it, I think you just need to start, right? Locate someone. It is a little confusing. There's a lot of different technology available, and it can get very overwhelming. In fact, I think that's a barrier why many folks aren't really adopting it, is because they just don't know which tool to use. They don't want to make a mistake. And they don't want it to go down a rabbit hole. So, but try to get over that. Try to find a partner that you like. Explore what opportunities are there. Most companies will be able to import, export data if you collect the data that's collected. And so, even if you decide, I want to start with this one and then move into this one. This one's the next really great thing. You should be able to do that. So the key is get started and do it small. We work with companies that say, gee, Laura, I've got 2,000. We have a customer who have 2,000 suppliers. It's daunting, right, to do that. But maybe we start with the top 100 that is the most prevalent or the highest dollar spend. Start somewhere. Maybe it's their own risk profile that they want to start with. And so we start there. So there's a number of ways to get started. The key is just get started. And as Andy said, you're going to have some hiccups out there. People, language challenges, document challenges, all kinds of things. But you'll be surprised at what kind of value you're going to get and benefits for your organization.
So first of all, Purist doesn't have this figured out by any means. We just want to. And my assumption is all of you are from the food industry, I suppose. So I think the one question that I challenge you to ask is, are you proud of your supply chain or are you not? And if you're proud of it, highlight it, tell that story. And if you're not, fix it fast. Because I trust that you're all food eaters and you care about where your food comes from. So then my challenge to you there is be more curious, ask more questions, dig in, because we all know we have a choice in the ingredients we put in our food. And it's up to us as the food industry to make the right choice for consumers. And I think that is a great opportunity. And we can use technology to tell that story and to create connection and ultimately create value in the whole supply chain for everybody.